Hello, I'm Lucas Ruebbelke, a Google developer expert, published author, and a principal engineer at Venmo. I think that Angular is a great framework for building applications very, very quickly. We are going to start with the Angular CLI, and we're going to build out a non-trivial master detail view application that communicates with a REST API. And so by the time we are finished, you will be up and running. And in the process, here are some of the tips and tricks that I use in my workflow every single day. And so let's go and be awesome together. Now I'm going to just do this off of my desktop. And so we can see here, I'm going to show what version I have. So I'm running 13.03. And now let's generate a new application. So I don't know, let's go hello FEM for Frontend Masters, and it's going to ask us a few questions. Would you like to add routing? I do like to add routing, which is going to add another routing module. And what style sheet format would you like? So we're going to go with SCSS. And you can see here that it is generated a bunch of files, and then now it's going through and installing some dependencies. And we're going to let this kind of do its thing. And what's funny about this is this takes all of 3 minutes, 4 minutes. You know, it's hard to say. That took even less. But this used to take me an afternoon. So from here, I'll just clear this, and we're going to step into this. All right. And you can see here that it's generated our source, node modules, etc. here. And before I do any of this, I'm just going to go npm start. And let's see what happens. So it is with Angular 13. They've changed the way that they bundle the files, but they have baked in like caching into this to make it a little bit faster. And you can see here, compiled successfully, and we are on localhost 4200. And so this is our application. And the Angular team has graciously gave us a couple of links here that we can click through. It was very nice of them to tell us what we can do next. And so from here, let's hop back into the command line, and I'm just going to open a new window here. And let me just open this up in VS Code so we can see this as well. In the source, we have app and a couple things. So we have our app module, which let's just use our previous kind of that high level thing to just kind of anchor some of this. We have our app component, browser module, and our app routing module. So browser module comes from Angular, and this app routing module is what was generated from the CLI. And we don't have any routes in here, but it has went ahead and created this for us, and it is essentially added it via import. So if you have a module you want to make available to another module, this is where you do that. And we have our app component, and within this, you'll see here, not a lot's happening other than we have a class, our metadata here, and then this is all of our markup. So I don't want to get too much into this, but what we can do is ng, and I could type out component, but you can use C as a shortcut, and I'm going to do home, but you notice here that I have some command line history that it's kind of trying to spoil the surprise, but by using a D, a hyphen D, this allows us to run in dry mode or dry run. And so I recommend, especially if you're trying out a new one, that you can go ahead and check and just make sure everything is where it needs to be. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. And you can see here now we have our home component. And if I go back into my code, you'll notice here that inside of app, we have home component, our component class. We have a .scss or Sass file that we can put any kind of component specific styles, as well as a spec file here. So if I go back into the terminal and I go ng test, we'll see what happens. But what this should do is kick up a test runner, and hopefully, because I haven't done anything, I hope this passes, and that'd be amazing. But it is spinning up Karma, which is the test runner, and then it's saying, all right, we're going to run. So right out of the gates, and testing is something that's not very exciting, but it is absolutely critical. And the fact is that I've created two components from the generator. One came with the project, but then I have a home component, and it's already instrumented to write test. And so my experience is that the further the distance is away from writing code and being able to write and execute test, the further that distance gets away, the greater chance that tests are just not going to be written. And so I was able to generate a component, and boom, already have a test harness in place that works. Now, what we can do is we can iterate over this course's collection and display it as individual items. So let's go with, we'll do an unordered list, and we want to create a list item for every single course that exists. So what I can do here is I can, using ng4, I can say let course of courses, and then I can bind to this particular instance of whatever iteration it is. Angular does a really good job of keeping track of what item in the collection am I binding to. So in this case, let me just pick this up, and let me just, well, I'll pick up the whole thing, and this is going to be humorous, I think. We'll see what happens. And instead of courses, we're going to do course. Let's go back to our code. And so now all I've done is I've moved this into a list item. And so what we have here, just to summarize, is when you have a collection using ng4, you can iterate over that, and you can then, for every iteration, it pulls an item out of that collection, and then it allows you to display it. So what I can do now is we do something like course title. And we'll go here. Let's hop back into our code. And so now you can see it is in a list format. So what we're doing is we have the ability to then drill down and bind to a specific property on this item. Now, let's think about this. What if we were going to click on this and we're going to capture this? What would that look like? Well, we would use event binding. So here, click, and we're going to add a or define a method here called select course, and we're going to pass in the course. And so Angular also is keeping track of when I select course, what course am I talking about? And so now I do not believe that I have a select course method in here. So we need to do a couple things. So the first thing is I'm going to go selected course, and we'll just set this to null. And then what we can do, and this is actually course singular, I'm going to create a select course method that is going to take a course property, and it's going to assign it to selected course. Now, we'll save this, and let's go back into our template, or rather, into our template here, and I'm going to take, and we're going to do a pre-tag, and then let's go ahead and dump this selected course out. And we'll go using the JSON filter. Let's save this. And so now you can see that selected course is null. But once I select this list item, you can see here that this becomes the selected course. And I'm able to go kind of back and forth across these. One of the things that historically has been really hard in Angular that was very easy to do in AngularJS was the ability to dynamically instantiate and attach components to the DOM. It was just the way that they built the view renderer engine pre-Ivy that made this really, really difficult. With the, I would say, the migration into Ivy, this became a lot easier. And with Angular 13, this became incredibly easy, super easy, barely an inconvenience. And so I want to show an example about how to take a number of components and dynamically attach them to the DOM. And so we have a dynamic components example here. There's nothing happening yet, but I assure you, I do not have any aces up my sleeve, or do I? And with that, let's look into our code. Now, the one thing that I do want to show, again, this would be the equivalent of like nothing on my sleeve, is that inside of my dynamic component, all I have is just this toolbar, nothing else. And within my dynamic component class, I have a little bit of setup code here, which is fairly simple. I have a shapes array with a number of shape objects. So type square, square, triangle, circle, square, triangle. And the one thing that I have done for convenience is I've created a hash map mapping the type of the shape to a component, to its equivalent component. So circle, if you can believe it, is mapped to a circle component, and so forth. Now, just to dispel any mystery about what's happening in these particular components, these are very, very lightweight. And even just to reduce some of the cognitive overhead, I've went ahead and just put all of these components into a single file, kind of like I was feeling a little React-y when I did it this way. But just so that they're self-contained and I didn't have 4 files to represent something that was just a shape. We have our selector, a basic template, and then I have you can see here, I have a div with a class of circle that I'm just drawing a circle on it. And I've done the same thing for square and triangle. And so there is very little here other than I just needed something to visually represent a component on the page that we could delineate it from everything else. And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to iterate over this shapes array and attach these to the page. Now, in order for this to work, I need to add in view container ref. So private, and we'll go view container ref. And now that we have injected the view container ref, let's hop into our ng on init and let's write some code. Now, what's fun about this is that this is going to be an incredibly concise bit of code to make this work. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to iterate over shapes. And so I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. Shape, I get rid of all these helpful, not helpful hints here. And now, moment of truth, the grand finale. We're going to go this, view container ref, create component, and from here, we're going to look up our components, and we're going to go shape.type. And so what this is going to do is essentially look into the hash map here and pull down square component, triangle component, and circle component. And so this entire example comes down to this single line, which I think is really awesome. So view container ref dot create component. And now if we go back into our code, here we go. And so that was almost too easy. It kind of feels like a trap, but I assure you it's not.